I'm going to talk for a few minutes about food safety news, about agriculture and transparency, and share some of my experience on with these issues. And then I know we're both looking forward to taking some questions. Okay, so Food Safety News, we're a free daily online newspaper dedicated to all things food safety. We were founded in 2009 by Marler Clark, which is a food safety law firm in Seattle. And now, since we've grown so fast, we're also partly supported by advertising as well. And though we're sponsored by the law firm, we are editorially independent and operate independently. We're very active on social media. We have, probably 15,000 followers on Twitter and Facebook. We always put our headlines out. We respond to readers. We respond to questions. We're very responsive and active with our audience. If they give us feedback on a story, we try to get back to them. We cover a broad variety of anything food safety related. So foodborne illness outbreaks, recalls, food politics. I'm based here in DC, so I cover a lot of, anytime Congress decides to get involved in these issues. I also cover FDA and USDA really closely. We have a pretty broad audience. I sometimes say I have to write for, moms and food scientists, which is a tough balance to strike sometimes. But so we know that federal agencies read food safety news every day. We have a big readership here in DC. FDA, USDA, CDC. We have a lot of industry. We have a big industry audience as well. People who are in food safety and quality assurance. If you want to watch the recalls, we always have the recalls up there. It's kind of, well, it wasn't me, it was someone else. Keeping tabs on kind of the whole space. It's a good place. Everything comes together there. We also have a pretty big consumer audience. And so these would be consumers that are really interested in food issues or food policy and follow these things really closely. This is not your average consumer that's reading our niche publication every day, but we do have a good chunk of consumers. And then I want to reiterate what Janie was saying. The trade publications, anytime you're in a niche, mainstream media is going to rely on you. And I think this is one of the things that surprised me being in this space, is that you have to remember that newsrooms are half the size they were a decade ago. So reporters that are covering food safety might be covering a lot of other issues, and they can't follow the minutia, the day-to-day as closely as we can. And so they use it for background. I hear from reporters directly often. It's very similar to all the points that Janie brought up. You are often a resource. We are linked to all the time. New York Times, Washington Post, Chicago Tribune. We are constantly used as a resource, blogs as well, and quoted too. So we'll just, if a reporter or blogger, reporter, whoever it is, doesn't have time, they're trying to put together a story in 45 minutes or less, they can just pull, Undersecretary for Food Safety, Dr. Hagan told Food Safety News, and they're just pulling quotes from interviews. They're pulling information and linking, and it's really rapid. And so, we're certainly a resource, even though we're in a niche. We reach a larger audience that way. So it's just foodsafetynews.com. And then, how many people use Twitter? I'm just curious. I saw some people tweeting. Oh, okay, that's pretty good. So we do tweet all of our headlines, and we also tweet other, we tweet Meeting Place. We try to get other media outlets that are talking about food safety in there as well, and it's at Food Safety News. So as I was thinking about the theme of this panel, I realized that actually I think the voice of agriculture and the voice of the media have a little bit in common, in that both are not necessarily the most trusted. They're not the most trusted sectors in society, very important, but not necessarily very trusted. So according to Gallup, Americans remain largely distrusting of the news media. 55% say they have little or no trust in the media to report the news fully, accurately, and fairly, and 60% perceive bias one way or the other. According to U.S. Farmers and Ranchers, this is a survey they did last year, 42% of consumers say the U.S. is headed in the wrong direction, or on the wrong track in the way we produce food. 19% say they don't know, 39% say right direction. I hear a lot of rumbling from your industry about how unfair the media is. My guess is if I polled everyone in this room, there would be a lot who loathe journalists, and I'm not going to do that because Janie and I are up here, but I would assume that you might rank the media maybe just barely above animal activists. And to a certain extent, I can I can understand that. There are reporters I cannot stand. We are in a media culture where sensational sells and catchy or scary headlines are better at getting ratings and traffic, like Janie talked about. And all of this translates into advertising dollars. So I guess you can kind of understand the framework that they're working in. And in the age of social media, news travels really fast, so it's really hard to take a story back. It's really hard to reframe a story. So I understand the frustration. The news often makes me cringe too. But I think to a certain extent there is a transparency issue here. And I was really glad to see that this has been brought up a lot of times. I think sometimes there is a transparency issue that can feed into this negative narrative against conventional large-scale animal agriculture. So today I thought I would share a story about a time that I was particularly frustrated and kind of show you how that frustration from a reporter's perspective actually translates into the type of coverage. So we're going to go back to August 2010. I'm busily covering the Food Safety Modernization Act at this time. It is slowly inching towards passage in Congress. Note this is a year before it actually gets passed, but it's slowly going along. August is kind of a slow time in DC, and all of a sudden we have a really big story. We have a really big situation. So CDC links 1,400 illnesses to salmonella-contaminated eggs. Wright County Egg and Hillendale Farms, which are both in Iowa, initiate a nationwide recall totaling 550 million eggs. 24 brands and 12 retailers are affected, and this is a huge story. This was all over, obviously the mainstream media, blogs, Twitter, Facebook. It was definitely being discussed by a lot of people. And so usually I cover food safety from DC. I go to hearings, I track with the interest groups, industry groups, what's going on here in the Beltway. But when there's a really big story like the oil spill or a big outbreak, whether it's in Arizona or Iowa, wherever, we try to get someone on the ground to do a little bit more detail. So next thing I know, I am on my way to Iowa. And I had never been to Iowa. I was really excited. I had always wanted to go. It really is covered in corn. And I actually thought it was beautiful. People told me they didn't think I thought Iowa was beautiful. So what I really wanted to report on in Iowa was not on the companies that were, involved in the recall and the outbreak. Obviously, they were under investigation. That was not what I was after. So what I wanted to do was visit an egg farm that had implemented the new egg safety rule that FDA had just put in place the month before July. So the egg safety rule had gone into effect a month before the recall, but it had gone into effect right after the illnesses started sparking. So it was kind of a weird, or spiking. So it was kind of a weird timing. So I wanted to know, what did these preventive controls look like in practice? What were the best practices, and what does a state-of-the-art facility look like? I had never been to an egg farm. I didn't know firsthand what one should look like. And we were seeing some media reports that suggested at least one of these farms was considered kind of maybe a bad actor within the industry. But I wanted to see what a good actor looked like. So I wanted to see the egg safety rule in action. And I'm thinking this shouldn't be a big deal because we had been hearing from egg companies and trade groups that the large companies had been in compliance for several months, even before it had officially kicked in. So got in touch with the Iowa Egg Council. I said, I'm on my way. I told them what I wanted to do. I immediately up front said, no cameras, no video. I knew that wasn't going to get me anywhere. So I just want an interview and I want a tour. And I'll focus on the egg safety rule, best practices. I want to know what it's supposed to look like. So I'm thinking, this shouldn't be too big of a problem. The Egg Council communications guy was really helpful. He said, it sounds like a great story. I'm taking it to the council to see who can work with you, and, I'll get back to you. I'm thinking, I'm in. I'm great. I'm really excited. I'm going to get the story. I'm in Iowa. So we go back and forth for a couple days. He asked the council twice if anyone will give me access. No luck. No one will agree to do a tour. No one will even talk to me. I cannot even get a phone interview with a food safety specialist from any of the farms in Iowa. At this point, I'm really frustrated. I've come all the way to Iowa. I was really excited to learn more about egg production, and I'm coming up completely empty-handed. So with no luck getting in, I decided to drive to one and just see what it looks like from the outside. And I mean, I hadn't seen one. It's huge. I mean, I said it's not really an egg farm; it's an egg city. I mean, the efficiency and the scale was amazing. And I think I tweeted a couple pictures, and I had lots of people responding. Oh, you know, sharing the photo and all of that, because a lot of people were talking about egg production at this time. So this is the closest I got. So how does this experience translate into coverage? So the first story I did while I was there was about the fractured, egg oversight, I guess. So I found that, no one, not even state officials, had ever inspected these facilities. And responsibility for egg safety is really fragmented. You have, FDA responsible for safety of shell eggs, and then you have USDA overseeing processed eggs or breaker facilities. And so, there's a lot of ways to see how things get fall through the cracks. But now FDA has the egg safety rule. So the one good interview I was able to get was with Daryl Trample, and he's the poultry extension expert at Iowa State University in Ames, and he was really helpful. And a lot of his interview ended up in this article just about how the industry oversees itself and the ways that they take preventative measures. But even though he works really closely with the industry, he was unable to help me get into a single egg farm either. So here's the next story I did. Basically, the last day I'm in Iowa, I said I'm not leaving Iowa without seeing a single egg. So I start calling around, looking for a smaller place or somebody, organic or whatever, who will let me in and kind of show me. So I find this farm south of Wright County Egg, and the story is basically about how it couldn't be more different. They only have 200 layers. I mean, they're obviously, you can see, not in cages. They're listening to rock music. It was pretty much the opposite of large-scale egg production. But my whole story was about how this farmer, I really appreciated her time. I learned a lot from her. She talked about the different ways she controls rodents, the ways she sanitizes eggs, refrigeration, all of that. She's sold mostly to the Des Moines Farmers Market and then some restaurants in the area. But I also, in my story, I noted the difference in transparency. So I said, quote, I think you can see the top of it there. I don't know if you can read this, but it said, and then there is the issue of transparency. Despite numerous attempts, Food Safety News and the Iowa Egg Council were unsuccessful in finding a single large-scale producer willing to give a tour or in-depth interview on egg production and the new Food and Drug Administration egg safety rules. Ty Johnson Spratt, who runs Fox Hollow Farms with her husband Thomas Spratt, offered a tour with less than a day's notice. So I think this is just an example of how this story would have looked a lot different if I had had different access, or if I had had more of, if there had been more of an open door policy as far as at least talking to someone about the food safety or the egg safety rule as it works on a large scale, where we all get our eggs, where Safeway gets their eggs. This article got a ton of traffic. There was a lot of people Googling about eggs and reading egg news, and this was part of the mix. And this farm also ended up getting a call from Dan Rather's production team, and they actually visited the farm and interviewed her as well. I think if you Googled some combination of Iowa egg farm, this comes up as one of the top hits. So now I know other media outlets have also talked to these farmers. So this is an example. This is the story I could do because I had the access. So I didn't get the story that I wanted, which was how to do it right on a large scale, how to implement the egg safety rule. But this salmonella egg story continued, and it was overwhelmingly negative. We didn't see a lot of positive images here. We have this is a photo I took at the hearing. We had the egg executives before a congressional panel, some of them pleading the fifth. We had images from the FDA's inspection of the implicated farms, and they weren't exactly pretty. We also had, so this is the first line of a Washington Post article that came out at the end of August. Said federal investigators found piles of manure up to 8 feet tall, live mice, pigeons, and other birds inside the hen houses at 2 egg farms suspected of causing a nationwide outbreak of salmonella. And I kept thinking when all this was happening, if this is an outlier, if this isn't normal, if this is, the wrong way, why wouldn't they show me the right way? And it was a frustrating experience. Many consumers are not informed about modern food production. I think everyone in this room knows that. I certainly have learned a lot in my years covering these issues. I think a lot of consumers don't know a lot about alternative or organic or free range. I think they don't know a lot about all those alternative production methods either. But I think we also have to ask, given the opportunity, will you show reporters what you do? Are you willing to open your doors and explain it to consumers and show consumers what you do? I think the bottom line is that interest in where food comes from and how it's produced is increasing, and it is increasing more every day, and that trend is only going to continue. There's going to be more coverage about how eggs and other animal products are produced, whether you let the media in or not. And just from experience, it can be frustrating when you don't let us in. And I would argue that your voice isn't going to be heard at all when you don't.